Alright, we're back with another
It was 15
video.
years ago.
Scary animated
When I was
videos.
11 years old, I used to live with my uncle, who was 31 years old at the time. He took me away from my family, telling them how great I would be if I stayed with him in his farmhouse. Well, he actually had a really nice farmhouse. However, that was totally fake. He also had a big van that he used to kidnap kids
Oh,
in.
heck no, bro.
He
Nah,
usually
not
abducted
doing
lost
that.
kids or the kids who were playing in the parks. Yeah, right. He was such a serious kidnapper and murderer. While he was tying up the children after the kidnapping, he ordered me to dig a hole for each one. Of course, I didn't want to do that. I was just horrified and scared of my uncle. One day, I stayed with the kids inside the basement to monitor them. Crying, they were begging to let them go. I could see that some of the kids were almost the same age as my age, so I untied them and let them sneak out by the back door so my uncle couldn't see them. He was in the kitchen sharpening his knives.
Bro, this man is a
I
psychopath.
returned to the kitchen acting like nothing happened, but somehow when he lifted his head, he noticed through the window that they were running away. He got mad, grabbed his gun, and then he ran out the door trying to shoot them. I immediately ran with him, watching them and hoping that they could manage it. And all the kids succeeded to run away, fortunately. I could see that one of them even waved to me to say goodbye. My uncle told me not to worry, and that he'd get more kids the next morning. It seemed like that he was thinking that I was the one who was disappointed about the kids' escape, or whatever. The next morning, I woke up and figured out that he was not there. And all of a sudden, I heard a loud siren, and soon after, the police entered inside the farmhouse. They found me and asked me if I was one of those kids who was kidnapped by him.
Get the police on
I
him.
couldn't
The
lie to him.
12.
I always felt sorry for lots of kids who got kidnapped by him. So I told them that I was his nephew, and they took me with them for questioning. I was crying so badly when I confessed the truth about him to the police. It was the hardest moment that I had to give proof of my uncle's serious crime, because I loved him anyway, whether he's a criminal or not. But I knew this day would come, and actually, I was waiting for it. They didn't believe me at first, but I revealed the location of the holes to them. After digging, the police found bodies under the ground.
Dang.
At that time, my uncle got back to my mother's house, hugged her, and begged to stay for a while. However, the police had already told her about the incident and what had happened to me. So she told him he could stay, but as soon as he got to the bathroom to shower, she alerted Dad and they called the police. My uncle was arrested finally, and the police thanked me and told me that I was such a brave kid. They brought me back to my parents, and I could have a better life with them. My uncle was charged with kidnapping, murdering kids, and even showing me such terrible things that kids should not see. He was condemned to death, and not long after, finally hanged. My name is Jonathan. I live in an average apartment. There are main roads via my apartment, but there's also a shortcut too, which makes it faster to go to one of my friends, Nick's house. However, the weird thing was that nobody uses the road. I didn't know until I saw something on it that very day. One day, I went to visit Nick as usual. We played some kinds of games together in his house, having snacks. The outside had become dark, and when I looked at the time, it was almost 10 p.m. Then my mom called me to get back home as soon as possible. It seemed like she got
why does his face look like that?
mad, so I packed my stuff quickly. I got out of my friend's house, walked for like 2 minutes, and then I decided to walk through that shortcut lane this time. Because it was completely dark, it gave me a chill, but I was in a rush, so I lighted my phone's flash and walked through the road. It was a straight road, and all the leaves and bushes were on the two sides. And the next moment became the most terrible memory for my entire life. While I was walking alone, my phone's battery suddenly died. Holy crap, I mumbled to myself. But at that moment, I was so freaked out. I made my pace quicker when I heard someone's footsteps. When I looked up, There was a figure in front of me that was almost black and invisible. All lampposts in that road were broken except 2 of them. But those 2 lampposts were flickering continuously, and the figure was slowly walking closer to my sight. When the light fell on his face,
Bro, I'm gonna smack your forehead, bro. Get out of my face. Out of my view.
he had a cut in his throat, and the blood is falling out of his cut. I tried to ask him if he needed any help, but then
No.
he put his hand on top of his head slowly, and he picked it up.
Wait, what?
I could see his head was dividing from his body,
What?
and he was just standing there, holding his head in one hand and looking straight into my eyes. I couldn't even move because I was so terrified at that moment. All of a sudden, his head was laughing loudly and gave a shriek loudly at the very next. I stepped back, and then he came in front of me again with big strides.
Bro, how is he still alive?
This time, I could see those 2 lampposts which were flickering above him all went out. And I don't remember anything after that. The next morning when I woke up, I was in a hospital. It turned out that some guy who was jogging around found me unconscious on that road. My mother was sitting next to me with an anxious look, so I told her my entire experience. When I finished telling her, she seemed a little surprised, and then she patted my back. She told me that there was a man who was murdered and beheaded by some gang members on that road a few years ago, but the police could neither find his head nor the criminal. Since then, lots of people saw the same stuff as me, so they stopped using that road. Even now, whenever I go to my home, I still ignore that frightening road and take another long path. It would always make my heart sink just thinking about that incident itself. My name is Alan, and this happened a year ago. I was at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport and about to check in.
I like how they use the same character's voice.
I was standing in the line to check in when I noticed that someone was staring at me. It was a girl. She seemed like an ordinary girl at first, but then I noticed that her eyes were odd. They were open, very wide. She was smiling at me, but her smile was kind of annoying and crooked. I got creeped out, so after I was finished checking in, I quickly went through immigration and headed to the flight gates. Before going to the gates, I stopped at the restroom, and while I was urinating there, I could hear someone faintly whispering outside. I could tell that it was a girl's voice. When I finally walked outside, I encountered the same girl who I had met at the check-in line.
Just push her and then move.
She was just standing there.
Oh, what does she want? That makes me mad.
But then, I saw scissors in her pocket.
Oh, hell no.
I quickly pushed her, ran away, and hid from her for a while. 30 minutes later, I barely arrived at the gate. And guess who arrived at the gate?
The girl.
Right. The same girl was there again.
How does no one see her?
She was literally stalking me the whole time. Right then, I was terrified.
Bro, I'll be mad.
So when we started boarding, I made sure that I didn't make eye contact with her at all. Fortunately, my seat was apart from hers. So at least I felt a little relieved during the flight. But this story didn't end there. When I arrived in Dubai, I quickly got out of the airport and headed to the currency exchange counter. While I was exchanging my money, I looked around several times, but there was no sign of her anywhere. I quickly grabbed my money, but the moment I turned around, my heart dropped. The same girl whom I met at the airport was there.
I don't care.
She was staring at me, holding scissors. But this time, she started twitching bizarrely. Her smile became bigger and even scarier, and she was walking toward me, closer and closer. It was almost 2 a.m., and there was nobody else around in that area.
Now what about the guy you just gave the
I
ticket
had
to?
no choice but to run, so I dashed quickly away and started searching for a taxi to get to the train station.
What about the guy you
Just
gave the
then,
money
I
to?
realized that the girl started to speed up to chase after me. Luckily, I narrowly found one taxi, and when I got in, it was a sigh of relief. When I glanced out the back window, the girl was standing there and was staring straight into my eyes. After 2 weeks, I went back to Manila. Of course, I didn't see her anymore after that night. However, the memory of that girl has been
Look,
haunting me to this
she's
day.
right there.
I haven't been able to forget her face.
Alright guys, I hope you liked that video. I know it's short, I'm sorry it was short, but I didn't know what kind of video to make, so here you go, just scary animated videos. Hope you liked it. Goodbye, subscribe, and LeBron James.